Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee, including those watching online. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security door to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the Green, where officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. Does anyone intend to film or record audio of the meeting? I would advise that if filming does take place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured. I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Any speakers using the microphones in the middle may be picked up by the cameras recording the meeting, and members of the public in the public gallery behind them may have their image captured. Would everyone present please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive calls or messages in the chamber while this meeting is in progress. Now, before I go any further, I first would like to welcome Mr. Hughes to the committee tonight. We are privileged. He was a little dismayed when I insisted that we use the traffic light timer tonight, as you can see here, and I know that the speakers have been introduced to. And that is also partly because tonight is the last night that we expect to see the traffic light timer. So it's goodbye to the traffic lights tonight, because sometime in the next 4 weeks we will have the new technology. Thank you, Councillor Bright. We should have, I don't want to jinx it, we should have the new technology installed that brings all of the rest of our microphones back into use, and will also mean that the screens where members of the committee and people in the room can see what's being shown on the screens will also be visible to those who are watching online, which has not been happening so far. So, yes, Councillor Bright, thank you for that. I have now back onto the official part. I have the following members who wish to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1, and that is item 5B, Councillor Abby Smith. Do I have any other members wishing to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1? No, thank you. Do I have any apologies? I don't think so. No, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Alban and Councillor Bright.
Yeah, Chair. 5B, 5D, 5E, and that is because they are TDC applications.
Right. Sorry, what was that? 5B, 5?
5B, 5D, 5E.
5D. 5B, 5D, 5E. And Councillor Bright?
The same.
Thank you. Sorry, that was a correction. Councillor Smith is speaking on 5A, not 5B. Next item. Do members agree that the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 18th of February 2026 be approved as a correct record? Can I have a proposer, Councillor Moore, and a seconder, Councillor Boyd? Do members agree? Thank you. So moving on to agenda item 4, the Principal Planning Officer will now outline the report.
Thanks, Chair. So this application was on the agenda last month. There was a resolution to grant for the change of use. So this application has been brought back to members as a issue was identified that the noise impact assessment had not been updated following amendments to the roof of the smoking shelter. So just to remind members of the plans, this was the site outlined in red here in North Down Road. This was the building here. And then this was the rear of the site. So the smoking shelter was going to the rear here, and there was a noise impact assessment submitted with the application that considered a number of issues to do with the actual use, but also of the smoking shelter itself. The original plan showed a roof on top of the smoking shelter, or half a roof on the smoking shelter. Amended plans were then submitted, which removed that roof, but the noise impact assessment had not been updated. So this was the rear elevation of it, with the wall containing the smoking shelter, and then this was the smoking shelter at the rear here, and then this was the existing layout, and then this was the proposed layout. So the smoking shelter on the right hand side of this slide, inside this enclosed wall area here. So a new noise impact assessment has been submitted. Environmental Health have commented on that impact assessment, and they are satisfied with the assessment. There's still a restriction on the hours of use of the smoking shelter, so it can only be used between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. It was also noted that with the noise impact assessment, this was on the basis of only 3 people using the shelter at any one time. So that's now been added into the noise management plan to restrict the use of that for only 3 people at any one time, in addition to the no music being played within the shelter and a requirement for the behaviour of customers to be monitored. That's all set out within the noise management plan. As a result, conditions 4 and 8 of the previous proposal, which is set out within Annex 2, have been updated just to refer to the updated noise management plan. So it continues to be recommended for approval. No other changes are being made. It's just that update to those 2 conditions. So it's recommended again for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Do I have anyone who wants to speak? Councillor Bright?
Really quickly, can I just ask what's next to it? Is that a roof terrace next to it? So is that someone's garden now that's going to be affected in the building next door?
These are all commercial units at ground floor level. So it looks like that is a roof terrace at first floor level to potentially a flat that maybe would be above the commercial use. But the noise impact assessment has considered all the closest windows, so it's looked at the nearest bedroom windows to the smoking shelter.
But you're essentially going to have what was a covered smoking shelter is now got no roof on it, and if they're in their garden, they're just going to have smoke all day.
All I'd say is that the smoking shelter without the roof was part of the report that was brought before members last month. So it was already approved without the roof on it. It was just the fact that we hadn't considered the impact from an updated noise impact assessment from the smoking shelter not having a roof. So that's now what's been considered. And like I say, the update Environmental Health is saying they're completely satisfied with. So I appreciate what you're saying in terms of proximity to that roof terrace, but I believe the impact assessment has just looked at the impact on relationship to the closest windows. I think the nearest ones were 10 metres away, and I think another one was 25, and they've looked at that impact.
Thank you. Councillor Moore?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I totally appreciate what Councillor Bright was saying, but there's nothing to say that area is actually permitted development anyway. It could be illegal for all we know, and I would have thought they would have looked at that at the case. So I'm just pointing out the other side that although someone has made that a terrace, it might not actually be approved.
Okay, I don't have any other speakers, so we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. Those in favour, please indicate. And against? And any abstentions? Thank you. So that is approved. Right, thank you. Moving on to the next item, which is agenda item 5. Any site visits will take place for committee members on the morning of Friday the 27th of March. And so we now move on to agenda item 5B and the public speaking. So speaking in favour of the item for Vincent Yard, Vincent Road, is Alexandra Woodbridge, speaking on behalf of John Hill. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, councillors.
Sorry, it's 5A again. As it's written in here.
I am the partner of the applicant. We bought the building referred to as Unit 1 and the adjoining land, which is subject to the application, in December 2020 from the farmer Mr. Lamont. At the time and until May 2023, it was used by a groundwork company following the council's prior notification of approval for flexible commercial use, B1 business use or B8 storage and distribution. Since September 2023, the building is used by a company which produces bespoke handmade furniture. The company has been successful and now needs additional storage space, which is currently within the building, taking up space for the assembling of the furniture and limiting production capacity. I would like to deal with the key points raised by an objector in the parish council. Firstly, the sliver of land between the unit and the houses in Vincent Mews will not be used to access any of the area or the containers. The gate to this area will be replaced by a fence. The existing access between the two former agricultural buildings will be used and the trees will be retained. In addition to the parish council has raised an issue of noise from a sound system within the existing unit. We were not aware of this and have taken steps to address this situation, in addition to reminding them of their obligation under the lease not to cause unnecessary disturbance to their neighbours. As far as the lighting is concerned, we have now submitted details of our proposed lighting scheme, which will be low level in both height and intensity and no more than roughly 2 feet above ground level. Your officer's report deals with all the relevant planning issues raised by this application. The nearest container is about 35 metres from the back walls of the houses in Vincent Mews. The recommended conditions will tightly control hours of use and restrict that use to purely storage within the containers themselves. The case officer has worked effectively to adapt our proposals in a way which supports a local business and avoids unacceptable harm to the living conditions of residents. I therefore invite the committee to support the recommendation and grant permission with the suggested planning conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking against the application, I have Mary Ryan. You have 3 minutes.
Members, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I represent the residents of Vincent Farm Mews. The applicant seeks to formalise the use of Vincent Yard for storage, but the reality is stark, having already lived through 2 years of loss of amenity to our homes. Residents have lived with persistent noise, both human and mechanical, disturbance and disruption from vehicle movements and deliveries, and the operation of the businesses on the land and property subject to the application. Numerous complaints have been made to the council regarding these issues. It is critical to note that the council's enforcement team issued a notice in May 2025 requiring the cessation of the unauthorised use and removal of structures, yet the applicant continued, demonstrating a clear breach of planning rules and disregard for council directions. This history cannot be ignored. Even with some of the present activities contained, residents already experience noise from the industrial activity and traffic. Formalising this use risks permanent intensification, locking in harm to residential amenity. The strip of land alongside the western boundary of Unit 1 is 3 metres from the ends of the rear gardens of Vincent Farm Mews. These homes are now occupied in the main by families with young children. Any commercial use of this land would have an adverse impact on all residents' quality of life. An acoustic sound barrier rather than palisade fencing is already required along this boundary. There are at present 2 mature trees on this strip of land, which are a habitat for birds. The planting of trees by the applicant along this boundary would improve aspect, protect the countryside and wildlife, and provide a natural barrier. The containers, fencing and toilet block are industrial in appearance and highly out of character with the rural residential setting, contrary to policies SP24, SP26 and QDO2 of the Thanet local plan. While conditions may mitigate some impacts, they cannot erase the reality that this is a working yard immediately adjacent to homes with a history of non-compliance. If the council is minded to approve, we urge that any permission must include the following conditions. Number 1, the hours of operation must be limited to prevent disturbance outside reasonable working times. The yard must be tied exclusively to Unit 1 as a single business occupier. There must be no subdivision, multiple tenants or additional contractors using the yard to prevent intensification of noise and disturbance, light pollution and safeguard residential amenity. Without these conditions, approval would reward past breaches, perpetuate disruption and allow uncontrolled expansion of commercial activity in a rural residential setting. For these reasons, members, we respectfully urge you to refuse this application. If approval is granted, it must be tightly controlled and monitored to protect the neighbours who already bear the burden of this site. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking as ward councillor under section 20.1, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair, Committee. You've heard about the lived reality of the site. I want to speak to the planning record because it tells a very different story to the applicant's statement. This is the third iteration of proposals for this site. The previous application was refused in April 25 on 2 clear grounds. One, the use was unjustified in principle under policy SP24, and it was causing significant harm to residential amenity contrary to policies QDO2, QDO3 and SEO6. TDC Environmental Health found noise levels 24 decibels above background, which they described as a significant and observable adverse effect that should be avoided. Following refusal, the council served an enforcement notice, but the applicant has not considered that to apply to him. So simultaneously now has an appeal live with the planning inspectorate while submitting this fresh application. The applicant's agent states that the previous tenant, a scaffolding business, has left the site. The planning record, however, observes that the landowner admitted the use was causing significant harm and agreed to serve notice on his tenant. But when the enforcement deadline was missed, the tenants left only under sustained regulatory pressure. The landowner just permitted this intensely disruptive operation and acted only when compelled. That history matters because nothing in these revised proposals prevents it from happening again. No condition restricts Unit 1 to a single business occupier. Nothing prevents subdivision or multi-let use. Unit 1 already carries flexible B8 storage permission. Planning permission runs with the land, not with the tenant. The committee must assess the worst reasonable case, not the applicant's stated intentions. We've seen they may not be trusted. I urge the committee to refuse this application. If members are minded to approve, I ask that any permission includes, at minimum, restricted hours of operation, a cap on vehicle movements, and a condition tying the use exclusively to a single named business occupant of Unit 1. Thank you.
Thank you. I now have... Hang on, I'm just trying to read it. Speaking on behalf of Manston Parish Council, Parish Councillor Graham Elliott. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, Committee, and good evening, councillors. Sorry, it's disappeared. I've made two site visits to the place where the proposal has occurred. One with Councillor Smith and one with Councillor Wilson from Manston Parish Council. My focus is mainly on the impact that it's going to have with the people in the mews, particularly in the summer months when they're out in their gardens. The rear of the dwellings and the mews are adjacent to Unit 1 of Vincent Yard, and the fence in the gardens at the rear of is approximately 3 metres or 10 feet or so from the metal security palisade fence, on the other side of which is the space to be cleared to allow vehicle access if the application were successful. Unit 1 is used to make wooden tabletops, and as well as the noise that produces from mechanical saws, there is also a sound system which was playing loudly on the working day that I visited. There will be increased traffic movements, vehicles entering, unloading, loading and leaving the access space. Residents of the mews, numbers 1 to 6, would have more or less constant noise during the working days, Monday to Saturday, and this will be worse during the summer months when residents' windows are open and they are sitting in the back gardens. There's also likely to be security lighting going on and off during night times. Very quickly, I'd like to mention that there are 2 mature trees in the access road which will be cut down to allow vehicular access. The trees are in a healthy condition and will be a loss to birds and other wildlife in the immediate area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will now hand over to the Planning Applications Manager to outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. The application site is found in Vincent Yard on Vincent Road, so we are to the north of the airport, with Manston Road running north to south, DDS demolition to the southwest of the site. The site is outlined in red, so it is the land that is around Unit 1, that's included in blue because it's within the ownership of the applicant. To be clear, this application is not considering Unit 1, its operation, any impacts from Unit 1. So the proposal itself is for the use of the rear yard in connection with Unit 1, specifically under a B8 use for the yard, which is storage and distribution. So to give a bit of context to members, the residential units that are the closest proximity to Unit 1 and the rear yard were originally farm buildings granted consent in 2001. These buildings were part of the sort of the farm. Subsequently then in 2018 there was an application which identified Unit 1 in red here and the apron in front of the unit with a submission of a prior notification as to whether or not prior approval should be granted for the conversion of an agricultural building into a B1 or B8 use. B1 was in existence at the time. So that's a permitted development right. That was granted. As part of that process, there was consideration given to highways impacts, noise impacts on residents, public consultation occurred, and it was granted. So subsequent to that, and as mentioned, the council has been involved in this site by virtue of the unauthorised work that was occurring on the rear yard. Towards the end of the presentation, I've got some photos that were taken by enforcement with regards to some of the structures that were erected to the rear and the scaffolding yard that was taking place, which ultimately resulted in the planning enforcement notice being served in to the middle of last year. So as mentioned already, there was also a planning refusal which related to that use. That application was refused, and the notice was served, and there is an appeal ongoing about that notice. But there have been changes that have been made on site, and the business that use primarily related to and the impacts of that has ceased on site. And so this application is different from the previous application, especially because follow revisions throughout the course of this application. It is, as you will see from the description, it is for use ancillary to Unit 1, intimately connected to Unit 1, and there are conditions restricting it to being ancillary and associated with Unit 1. So this is the front of the property. So this is actually an image from Google, just because it's a slightly elevated position, so it gives you a better idea from 2021. So this is the unit itself with the apron at the front. So the main access to the unit itself is at the front of the property. On the left-hand side, on the western boundary, there is a gate that's present at the moment, and then you have another gate between the two previous agricultural units on the eastern side, which is the primary vehicular access to the rear yard. This is looking to the east down Vincent Road. This is to the west, so you can see the entrance to Vincent Farm Mews is just next to this site, and that's literally the boundary itself. The gate is sort of behind there, and then there's a closer image there where you can see there's a storage container which is part of this proposal to be moved, which I'll go through in a minute. But you can see one of the trees that's been mentioned, which is pretty much on the boundary, but slightly out. I think it's actually it's between the strip between the residential boundary and the new fence that's been erected, but we'll look at those trees as well. So in terms of the proposal itself, what's been put forward is for the storage containers which are on site at the moment. You've seen one of them, which is the double container, and there's another storage container which I'll show you, to be moved to the rear of the site and to be used for the storage of of different materials as part of Unit 1, as mentioned. There is also a toilet block which was erected previously, which is being requested to be retained. It was, from certainly my reading of it, it was erected for the previous usage, but it would be connected to Unit 2, which we'll look at. There's also the erection of the fence itself, which runs around the site. So it's 2.4 metres high, which is 0.4 metres higher than permitted development. So that is also part of the application. Mention's been made already to the western side of this site, and the proposal that's been put in is for the gate on the western side, which we looked at, to be replaced with a fence to stop it basically being accessible. And there is a condition which is proposed on the approval, which is condition 11, to basically state that it can't be replaced with gates or brought back into active use by vehicles. Primarily that is because that access runs down the back and is in close proximity to the residential properties. So it would be using the site entrance and the previous access before this business operated from the unit, which is on the eastern side of that unit. So looking at the existing situation on site, so this is from, so towards the end of February. You have a series of compounds here with sort of internal fencing, which is to be removed as part of this application. So that was erected when the previous firm was occupying the site. You can see the other storage container, the yellow one there, which is to be moved to the rear, through the northeast corner of the site, and the toilet block that was erected previously, which is simply now to be retained as a structure on site on the right hand side of the photo. So you can see the back of the residential properties over on the left hand side. So going round to look at the storage container in and of itself at the moment that's there, you've got the rear of the properties there, so you can actually see the palisade fencing there, and then behind it you can see this strip of land and then the rear boundary of the residential properties. This is then looking back towards Vincent Road down the western side of the development, so you've got two sets of gates there. Unfortunately the image is not going to be particularly clear, but that double storage container is in this area here, and here you can see those two trees that have been mentioned. So the application does not propose to remove those trees as part of the proposal. These trees, though, are not protected by any TPO at this point in time, but they don't form part of the application site. And this is just another view looking towards the other unit. Well, I will refer to it as Unit 2, which is the neighbouring site, but there you can see the block that was erected previously for as a toilet. So as mentioned, there will be space for a double container unit and another container there as well. In terms of the main issues for members to consider, it's looking at the principle of development, the impact on living conditions, impact on highways, and any other environmental effects. So in terms of the principle of development, this is because it's been applied for and will be connected to the operation of Unit 1, it is considered that it does comply with policy SP24 and E13 in terms of being an expansion of an existing rural business. So it's not considered that it is contrary to the principles of that policy, given that it is specifically related to Unit 1. In terms of the impact on living conditions, which is clearly one of the primary concerns of this, the main issues have been looked to be addressed by virtue of a series of conditions. So you'll see that there is an environmental health comment which has gone a bit of back and forth about what the proposal would be for. Specific concerns have been raised by officers about the potential for any activity or open storage occurring in the yard, given its proximity to neighbouring properties, and that is sought to be addressed by virtue of condition 4, which would state that no commercial, industrial, or manufacturing processes shall take place within the application site except those permitted by B8, which is just storage and distribution, and no mechanical and or hand tools should be used in the open air or within the storage containers, hereby approved. Condition 5 is that the storage of materials, plant and equipment shall take place solely within the approved shipping containers, with no storage of materials taking place in the open air. And condition 6 is to ensure that the site isn't used for the purposes of visiting members of the public in connection with the sale, purchase, order, return, parking or other commercial or industrial operations of Unit 1. And there are a series of other conditions as well. So those are the conditions that have been were put forward by the applicant. Condition 3 is a specific condition, just to pick up the point about the concern about subdivision. So this approval is on the basis of that it is intimately linked to the operation of Unit 1, which is confirmed within Condition 3, which is just to make it clear that it should not be used for any other purpose other than B8 in association with an ancillary to Unit 1 specifically, and no further changes of use via permitted development are allowed without, again, an application coming in. So we would have to get a planning application in for it to be used for anything other than what is being stated. So in terms of the other matters that have been subject to consultation, we consulted with the Highway Authority to consider that, and when looking at this proposal in the sense of what was already permitted by virtue of the prior notification and subsequent prior approval granted for Unit 1, it is not considered that there would be any demonstrable increase in movements from the use of this yard. Primarily it relates to Unit 1. There is obviously, as we saw in the photos, the primary access into the unit is at the front of the property, and there is a parking apron on that. This doesn't preclude vehicles accessing the rear necessarily, but it is only in connection with all those provisions as mentioned in the operation of Unit 1 for the manufacturing that's going on there, but no manufacturing to occur outside of the building. I will just show members a bit about what had happened on site, because I do think it is important context, but I do want to place that in a particular context for members. You can see from this aerial image from Google the structures at the rear which are not there anymore, and these photos are with Unit 2 is on the right hand side here. There's the toilet block again. You can see how it was being used, and so I absolutely can understand the concerns that members and that residents had, and the difficulties that were that did affect their living conditions, which is why obviously the council ultimately served an enforcement notice. However, it is very important that members do not consider the comments that were raised that would raise concerns that there will be further breaches as a result of that. This application must be considered on its own merits, and there are very tight conditions that we've proposed on the operation of this area, which we do think are sufficient in terms of mitigating any potential harm on the living conditions of residents. So the application, on balance, when looking at those conditions and the relevant policy framework, is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Second it.
Thank you. Do I have any speakers? No. Oh, sorry, Councillor Uzeki.
Thank you, Chair. Now, looking at the conditions, and as the planning officer has stated, it seems that's going to be quite tightly reined in at the back there. So, looking at the conditions, the fact that the side there's going to be a gate, the gate's going to be removed and sealed up, then I don't see much problem with this. Thank you.
Councillor Matterface.
I'd just like to ask, condition 10, which talks a lot about a cesspool, there must be obviously a reason why that condition, then with the alarm, a high level alarm, do we assume that there have been issues in the past, and that condition is because the toilet block that you've referenced is obviously not going to mains drainage? But I mean, you don't often see a particular condition relating to the emptying of a cesspool on these documents. Thank you.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. You wouldn't normally see a condition like this. So this has been requested by Environmental Health. So primarily when it comes to non-mains drainage, that is a matter for the Environment Agency. Depending on the nature of the work would depend on whether or not it actually requires planning permission or not in this instance. In this instance, it has been identified, it's installed there in terms of that side of things as part of the toilet block. By virtue of the fact that it was included on the plans, Environmental Health did consider that it would be worth putting the condition on to just an additional safeguard. Ultimately, that non-mains drainage is dealt with via the general binding rules as part of non-mains drainage, which the Environment Agency would look at. So if there is any actual enforcement issue because of problems that are caused, it's the Environment Agency that would be the enforcing authority. But we have put the condition on because Environmental Health have asked for it.
Thank you. Councillor Wing.
I mean, it's not a very attractive building, is it? And doesn't look a very modern industrial unit either. And so I'm wondering, I mean, I think there are a range of conditions that are going to help address some of the issues. But one of the ones I worry about is noise. Power tools make noise, and there'll be big power toys. And it doesn't look as if it's the building that would have modern standards of noise insulation. It looks as if it's not fiberglass, but asbestos, old corrugated asbestos. That's what it looks like, which doesn't particularly defend against noise very well. So I still am worried about the noise leaching out of that building, because it doesn't appear to be of a modern construction. So I do think that is an issue. I also, the screening along the no man's land, if we call it the no man's land, did I hear that there is plans to put some more vegetation along that boundary, which over time will help alleviate some of the noise? But I wonder if there's already been complaints about the noise coming from the building, are there any conditions that can be put in place to try and ensure that is addressed?
So this application is just for the land surrounding it. In terms of the use of that building, because of the nature of the permitted development right, which resulted in its change, it's now operating as a sui generis use, so it's a unique use to that business. Now, that does mean if it's moving away from that business, which is effectively a light industrial use, it's what used to be a B1 use and is now a use class E use, that would separately come under planning control. But we can't put a condition on the building, because that's not what's under consideration in this application. I would say, though, that it is a matter that I'm sure that Environmental Health are aware of if they've received noise complaints. And obviously, even though there is an interaction between what's been granted previously, planning permission, and the Environmental Protection Act, whether or not something constitutes a statutory nuisance, it would certainly be something that Environmental Health would want to be involved in to consider. But this application wouldn't be able to impose any sort of strictures or conditions on the operation of the building or the noise emitting from the building. In terms of the strip between the residential property boundary and this boundary, so that's not within this application site. You can see it on the red line. It's the gap between the two. So there's no requirement or proposal to put landscaping within that. Ultimately, we consider, with regards to the use of the yard, because of the conditions, that will restrict the noise sufficiently, but that wouldn't, we aren't through this application able to mitigate any existing impact from Unit 1, although that is something that Environmental Health separately under their own legislation will be aware of, and I'm sure would be, if there were concerns about operation, they would investigate it under their legislation.
Thank you. Councillor Garner.
Thank you very much. I just want to clarify something that Mr. Livingstone said about what we can and what we can't consider while we're considering this plan application. We've read about the previous planning application, which was refused permission, which was around the activities that have been going on in the yard and have continued to go on in the yard. even after the planning permission was refused, and that is going to appeal still, I assume. So it's going to be before the planning inspectorate as to whether or not that activity could go ahead, because if the planning inspector upholds the appeal, then permission will be granted for doing what has been done on that land at the moment. But I think you're saying we can't consider that. What we have to consider is this new planning application, which is before us, to do something different in the yard, because it isn't for the same activities, is it? So that would be for something different, and we might consider that actually is, if we grant this permission based on just looking at that and not considering the other one, that this makes a nice fallback activity for the yard if the appeal is unsuccessful for the old planning application, which has been causing issues and which was quite right for good sound reasons refused permission. So am I correct?
Yeah, it's the previous application, the previous operation was independent of Unit 1, and ultimately the officer view is that by virtue of this application being intimately connected with Unit 1 as part of and used ancillary to that, that is in part what makes it acceptable, as well as these conditions. In terms of the appeal, that is still pending. It was one of the many appeals that the planning inspectorate wrote to us to apologise it's taken so long to determine, but it is the case that appeal will continue to run unless the applicant decides to withdraw it. If it was to be granted by the inspectorate, then there is an either-or scenario about how it's used. The inspectorate potentially may put their own conditions on as well if it's uncontrolled use, not connected with the building. It just could be used by anyone for commercial storage. We've obviously raised concerns about that, which is why this application, in our view, is acceptable, but that wouldn't be. Therefore, whilst any decision that the planning authority makes is a material on the same site is a material consideration, we consider this to be different, and therefore that's why this is acceptable and that wasn't.
So have you had conversations with the applicant that might be along the lines of we've now got a use for that land, because it's the same applicant, isn't it, whichever, saying this is acceptable, whereas the other one isn't, so we would encourage you, please, to go forward with this if permission is granted for it. You know, that sort of, to try and encourage the one that's causing so much issue.
Yeah, well, that ultimately, that's why you've seen the photos. The particular issue, and I don't want to go into when certain things happen, because I think it's relevant for the enforcement process, but not relevant for the determination as such. Ultimately, we have worked with the applicant with the application coming in to get it to the point where we think it's acceptable, with the expectation, and the applicant's obviously spoken this evening, that this is how it would be used, connected with the existing business in Unit 1. So that is obviously what we anticipate to go forward. You know, we can't obviously make the decision for the applicant for them about the existing appeal that they've got in, but certainly this is what we've discussed and we expect to occur, you know, were it to be granted this evening. You know, we can't force the applicant to withdraw the appeal, but we will be obviously saying that appeal should still be dismissed because it relates to an independent use, which we don't think would be appropriate with comings and goings in the same way as an ancillary use such as this.
Thank you. Councillor Matterface.
I just want absolute clarification. What we're looking at is not what's going on inside Unit 1, which was referenced because manufacturing furniture. We're only looking at what the proposal is, which is the bit round it. So any discussion about noise or that sort of thing is not relevant, is it?
Noise from that unit, no.
But not the actual, what is actually happening in, because I mean it talks about
inside Unit 1.
Yeah.
Sorry to jump in there. Inside Unit 1, no, that's an operation that's just occurring. What's relevant is that how this will be used in association with that, which is why we're saying, you know, you can't just use that area, the outside area, to start manufacturing furniture, for example. It's just for the storage within the storage containers.
So basically, it's moving the two containers in conjunction, the fencing and so on, but we're not doing anything about what's happening.
Thank you. Councillor Alban.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to keep it simple, really, I think Councillor Matterface has just hit it on the head. We're only dealing with that. We're not dealing with anything else. Whether they comply with the enforcement notice or they didn't is beside the point. That's an appeal, whatever that may be. I think Councillor Smith needs to be a little bit careful what she's saying about the occupant of Unit 1, about how a matter of trust was there. That's irrelevant to the planning. So as far as I can see, the conditions have covered it, and I'm going to vote for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I now don't have any more speakers, so we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. Those in favour, please. And those against? And do I have any abstentions? Thank you. So the motion is carried. Thank you. So that means that we're moving on to agenda item 5C. I realise that those who were here for the previous item may want to leave. I always encourage people to come and stay for the rest of the meeting, but nobody ever does. So I will pause a moment while you depart. Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 5C is Manston Airport, Manston Road East, Ramsgate. Speaking in favour of the application, I have Mr. Michael Stevens on behalf of Tony Michael. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Chair, Committee, Councillors. I'll keep it quite brief because I'm hoping it's not too much of an application what we're putting forward. Just want to thank Duncan Fitt, Planning Officer, for the work he's put in, first of all. We've been operating myself at Manston for 7 months, but the market itself started around a year ago. Since we've been there, we've got combined following of 40,000 people across the social media. 65 to 70% is local trade, and 7 of the companies that provide services to us are all local. It was brought back from demand from the public, from the traders and the businesses that had grown from it, which pushed me to open the business and get it back at Manston Airfield for them. Just to add on regarding the airfield development itself, it has absolutely no hinder at all. It's a set up and pack down scheme, so we do not leave any footprint, we do not leave any rubbish. It's all sort of set up and packed down on the day. We have logistic companies managing traffic, so there is CSAS on the roads and other marshals within the car park, so it flows freely and doesn't have any traffic issues at all. And it's it's discounted to the local people. It's a good thing, I think, and there isn't really much more to add. I'm hoping it's pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you. So I now hand over to the Planning Applications Manager to outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. So the application is for a temporary use of the land at Manston Airport. So if I show you the area we're talking about, so what's being proposed is to create and use, and as they have already operated, a weekly market on a Sunday, which is located in and around the old terminal building. Specifically, it's in the apron in this area here to the rear of the series of terminal buildings on Manston Airport. You also have the previous parking area, which is utilised for visitor car parking as part of the proposal. So the main issue when it comes to this application is the fact that the Manston Airport site is safeguarded by virtue of SP 07, which just safeguards it for airport-related aviation uses. The development is also development in the countryside, but because this site is this bit of the site is brownfield land, it is in compliance with that. We have previously considered an application which came before members a number of years ago for operation of a business on the Northern Grass, and the approach that we have taken for applications for temporary uses is to consider whether or not this in any way could affect the ability of the airport to come forward in relation to that policy, and whether or not therefore it's an acceptable departure to the policy. In this instance, we consider it is, as already mentioned, all the work that occurs on the setup on the day, is everything that gets taken away. It's all temporary structures, but the use of the land exceeds the permitted development rights for how many times you can have a market in a year, which is why we have requested the application, and the applicant has worked with us to get the application in. So we have got this plan here, which just indicates there are a significant number of stalls that are able to operate on the site, but there are also a significant number of car parking spaces available by virtue of the airport operation. Highways have been consulted. They've raised no objection. Ultimately, as this is on a Sunday, there is less traffic on the roads. It's not considered there's any impact on any of the junctions, because members will be familiar with Spitfire Junction is already over capacity, but because of when this is occurring on a Sunday, it is considered that there is not going to be a harmful impact on the network. The only point I suppose I would raise is that KCC Highways did request that there was a time period placed upon the operation on a Sunday. We have considered that, but we don't think it's necessary, and therefore we have just restricted to it to be on a Sunday only. Ultimately, if it's outside the hours of, I think it was 7:30 till 5 that they've asked for, or maybe 5 till 5:30, because it's on a Sunday, there are no peaks in the same way in terms of morning and evening, so it's simply not considered to be necessary to do so. So it's just to restrict it that the market can only operate on a Sunday. There is a temporary time condition which is at the start, which is giving them 5 years. It's worth noting, I suppose, that the DCO has to be implemented by the 20th of May 2029, which is also the deadline for the compulsory acquisition for all of the buildings in and around the site as part of the DCO. So this permission would theoretically exceed that time period, but that doesn't cause an issue in terms of this planning application. So the application is recommended for approval as an acceptable departure to the policy. Thank you.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. And I have Councillor Bright first.
Thank you, and thank you, Ian. I think this is obviously really straightforward for me. Also, I think it's good to see a development that's actually going to happen at the airport. So I'm fully supportive of this.
Councillor Alban.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm pleased that it's not on the other side, on the northern side, because that is a nightmare at Spitfire Junction. So this is a damn sight better than that was over there. I can't see a problem with it at all. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wing.
Could I just confirm, May 20th, 2029, is that a fully functioning airport, or they can put some footings in?
They have to have commenced the development that was granted by virtue of the DCO. So just like a planning application or planning permission, you have to have commenced development. So it's operational development. And yes, it could technically be a trench. What I would say is the DCO has a very significant number of requirements or planning conditions, a lot of which have to have submissions before they can start doing anything. So, yeah.
I just need other clarification. I've got two questions. So what happens if there isn't any operational doodah on that day? And then I've got one more question. The DCO default?
It is not relevant to the determination of this application.
I'm just being cheeky, but I absolutely welcome this, although part of me says airport use only, so let's stick to it, rules are rules, but I absolutely welcome this, and it will probably make more profit than any previous airport or any future airport.
Councillor Green.
Yeah, as has been said, we have a policy, don't we? of only airport use.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that I will be supporting this application.
Hang on a minute. We've still got Councillor Green speaking.
Sorry.
And initially, we refused applications that weren't for airport use under the previous owner. And gradually, we are now approving applications that aren't for airport use. My question is whether we are gradually undermining our policy of airport use only.
So it really is about the fact that this is a temporary change of use. And I think we have got a few proposals that are going to be coming forward because we have been in contact with operators who are operating on the airport site that are basing on it being a temporary use. They are meanwhile uses, but some of them do require planning permission, such as this, because of the fact that they would exceed the permitted development rights for a market. So similar to other events on the site and the number of events that you can have, is whether or not that would constitute in certain areas material changes of use on the airport site. So we are looking at a number of uses like that. In terms of whether or not that speaks to an undermining of the policy, we don't consider it does. Ultimately, the DCO is in place, and the airport ultimately retains ultimate control about who operates on the site or not, which is, so the policy effectively would be safeguarded in a way by virtue of the operators being able to turf people off the site or break clauses in leases, etc. So we don't think it undermines the planning policy itself. Ultimately, the local plan will have to look at that airport policy, whether or not it continues as it is, depending on where it is in the timeline of what is going on at the airport or not. So, but in terms of this application, it is temporary, and therefore we don't consider it to undermine the policy.
So, Councillor Wright.
My apologies. I thought you were on my sight line. I'd just like to say I do pass the market on a Sunday afternoon, and round about 2:00, you wouldn't think anybody had been there. They're to be applauded for the way they clear away.
Thank you. Do I have any other speakers? No. In that case, we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. All those in favour, please show. And any against? And any abstentions? Thank you. So the motion is carried. So that concludes the public speaking for this meeting. You do now have to leave. It's for all three items that are remaining. So we'll just pause a little while you go. Okay, I will now call upon the clerk to read out the remaining planning applications. If a member wishes to reserve an application, will they please call out as the clerk reads?
Thank you, Chair. The applications are A02 FTH 260020 Kent Probation Service 38 to 40 Grosvenor Place, Margate, Kent, CT91UW. A04 FTH 260006 Kiosk King George VI Memorial Park, Ramsgate, Kent, CT118DE. And A05 LTH 251328 East Pier, Ramsgate, Kent.
Thank you. Can I have a proposer to move that the applications that have not been reserved be determined in accordance with the officer's recommendation? Councillor Uzeki, seconded by Councillor Matterface. Do members agree? Thank you. For the benefit of the public, I will now call upon the clerk to read out the applications that have been determined.
Thank you, Chair. They are A02 FTH 260020 Kent Probation Service 38 to 40 Grosvenor Place, Margate, Kent, CT91UW. A04 FTH 260006, Kiosk, King George VI Memorial Park, Ramsgate, CT 118DE. And A05 LTH 251328, East Pier, Ramsgate, Kent.
Thank you. And that concludes the business for this meeting. Thank you for your attendance and good night.